Here we go.
What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations, and I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, and 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. I also co-host and co-produce the only online show in the world for dads and fathers. It's sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. And being part of that team in 2022 and 2021, reached out directly and indirectly to over 100,000 fathers around the world. So as always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. And we are broadcasting live on Black Canada Talking, December 3rd. Yes, the first Sunday in December. How many shopping days left? I don't know, and I don't care right now. So for those who do or do not know about Black Canada Talking, it's an online event where we get Black Canadians to give their opinions, thoughts, and ideas and their POVs on things that are not only happening in their world, but also globally. So we've been doing that for a while, and we always like to have new friends on Black Canada Talking. But before we go any further, I always want to encourage you, if you're up to it, to subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button and hit the notification button. That notifies you of upcoming conversations, because I usually do minimum 4 live a week. Also follow the Dr. Vibe Show on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And also too, if you would like to advertise your business, product, or service on my platform or any of the platforms that I host, please feel free to email me at dr.vibe at the drvibeshow.com. As I mentioned, we like to have new friends on the Dr. Vibe Show platform. But today we have a returning friend who I saw, did we see each other maybe about 2 or 3 months ago? And we had to cut our conversation off because we would have ignored the event, which was, and she knows that. We would have ignored the event, and that would have been a little bit rude. And we don't like being rude, you know, but it was good to, and she's laughing in the green room. She knows exactly. She said, Dr. Vibe, I could just chat with you for hours. Well, the next step, the next part of our journey is today. And then we have a brand new friend with us today. And they're going to be on in just a moment. But recently in Toronto, we had a great event held by the Black Physicians Association of Ontario. It was called a Black Health Talk, and was a fireside chat for women refugees. And this conversation, no one knows about this who's coming on today, but is very close to my heart, because over the last few months, I've been giving my time, my energy to a group of 8 Black African refugee women and 1 gentleman. And the stories have been incredible. Their sacrifices, some of these mothers leaving their kids back at home for a better life. And it's just been amazing. So I got to shout out to Anita Wong, who has made this conversation happen. And when she brought this to my lap, I said, I'm all in. I'm all in. So let's bring Chenai up. Let's bring up Dr. O. Geez, Dr. O. Mine, this is Dr. Phil, Dr. O. And now we got Dr. O. Good day, ladies. How are we?
Excellent and excited to be here. Thank you for having us.
Super Sunday.
Yeah, there you go. Super Sunday. It's not even the Super Bowl. This is a better Super Sunday, right?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So I'm looking forward to having another epic conversation. You know, you're part of the party now, Dr. O.
Okay.
Realize that now. You're part of the posse, because now every time we get together, us 3, it's only epic conversations. So Chenai and I, we always have epic conversations. We know you joining us. You're with us.
I'm with you.
Yeah. All right. So since you're the newer person, I don't know who you is, and our family don't know who you is. Can you share a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Dr. Onye Nnorom, aka I'm known as Dr. O, and I am a family doctor and public health specialist. I'm assistant professor at the University of Toronto, as well as the past president of the Black Physicians Association of Ontario. So we're going to be talking about BPAO. I am past president. And my work, my clinical work, my work in academia, my community work has largely focused for the last decade on Black community health and issues of health equity, so health justice, and looking at how racism impacts people's health directly and indirectly. So looking at Black communities, but also other racialized communities, and how the stress of racism impacts health. So I wear a few different hats. Right now I'm taking a break from teaching. I'm on a sabbatical, on a teaching break, but yeah, pretty much all of my work has focused on that.
So here's first of all, congratulations on all the wonderful things you are, and will be doing. Now, you took a break. Now, have you filled that up with anything else? Are you really taking a break from teaching?
Sounds
I
like you
think
know
I got an
doctors
answer
really
already,
well.
but you can answer. Go ahead.
So no, but taking things slower. The pandemic was a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been very intentional that I could spend more time with my little ones. So I'm a mommy, and I have a 6-year-old, and my oldest just turned 8 last week. So it's been very intentional to just be doing things part-time. I usually spend a lot of my time teaching. So
Mm-hmm.
on this sabbatical, I have been doing a little bit more clinical work and outreach work that I didn't have time to do before. But overall, yes, rest is resistance. Rest is necessary. I walk my talk as far as a healthcare person. I also believe in taking care of myself because it's important, period, but also so I can take care of others. So I have been resting, actually.
I'm proud of you. You passed the test.
Woo, thank you. You know, as doctors, we like passing tests. So yes, thank you.
And your patient's passing test too, right?
Yes, yes.
Absolutely. All right. Chenai, I've never met you before. Who are you?
Well, I am a daughter of the soil. I am Chenai Kadungure. I am the ED at the BPAO, but I guess that's what I do. Who I am is, I'd like to say, a soldier for peace. I think we can see positive change in not just in our lifetime, but I want to say in my timeline. And yeah, some days are a fight, some days are a play. I hope there's more play than fight.
I don't know. There's so many conversation pieces. Okay, I'm going to start. Do you, both of you, remember the first time you met? Oh, the doctor doesn't remember, but you're not.
No, I had to remember it because it felt like we had known each other for so long. So I had to think back, but it's when the recruiter brought Chenai on, and I was one of the first people to, aside from our selection committee, to meet with her and see if she was a fit for the Black, because I was still president at that time of the Black Physicians Association. But the reason why I had to take a moment is because the moment we met in that Zoom kind of context, because it was in the pandemic, like there was just connection. Do you know what I mean? So it's like asking the first time you met a family member. Do you know what I mean? It's like that kind of vibe, like sis. But yes, technically that moment was at that point in the pandemic when I was when we were looking for an executive director, and I was like, yes, there is alignment.
One of my favorite words.
Can
Okay,
I just
go ahead.
say, Dr. O didn't do herself justice in her introduction. When I say this woman has changed the face of Black health, which has meant equitable health, exactly what she said, for everyone else. And she's one of the few people I know who does it, not asking anything in return. A lot of people don't know her, but should know her because she's fighting for them in the background all day, every day. So she's one of those people. So if I could give her her Order of Ontario today, I would. I always tell her, I was like, that's
what?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
That's amazing. Thank you for the sister love. The sister love.
It's facts. You know me, I don't give fake compliments. So.
No, I know you don't. I know you don't. So watching live, Orlando Lopez says 2 times in 1 weekend, Chenai. Oh, well, I don't know. Is that TMI or what?
Listen, I was just at the Jerk Festival gala last night, and so
Okay.
we had a conversation. But
Okay,
yeah,
all right. Just want to make sure there's Dr. O, behave yourself. Okay. Also,
I'm trying.
yeah, Dr. Tachi, who is chiming in from Florida, who hosts the livest online show about media, tech, and pop culture called Mediascope, which is on 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Instagram and then 6 p.m. on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitch, and also is the head of Indie Soup Media, which is a brand new online network starting by the end of this year. It's going to be broadcasting on YouTube and also Roku, and maybe Facebook, but I know for sure YouTube and Roku. And the Dr. Vibe Show is going to be providing content to start off 3 times a week on that platform.
Ooh.
So there we go. And also Dr. Tachai just this afternoon have been asked to join together on another venture, which is a whole other conversation, but it's not about me. It's through me today. Ladies, combine and tell us a little bit about the BPAO. We got past and we got current. So combine together and share a little bit about the wonderful organization.
Well, last time I was here, I think I shared too much about the organization, but I feel we need to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. So Onye, I think you can tell people the history.
Oh wow! Okay, I'm the horse. All right.
I didn't say anything. Me,
Dr. Vibe is like, drink water, mind my business. That's yes. Okay.
Go for it. Go for it.
So, I mean, the BPAO is a beautiful organization that comes out of a history of Black folks I think when they were in university, so this is even before my time in the 90s, really recognizing that there needs to be a voice for us with regards to health and equity and justice, and also increasing more of us in the health fields. So this was an original group. In fact, I can't remember the original name.
ABIS.
ABIS. Thank you. It was ABIS. Thank you. ABIS. So that was an acronym, but it was like, for an Association of Black Health folks. And over time, it separated into 2 groups that work very closely together. So it's not like drama separation. It just was a redefining. So out of that, you got the Black Health Alliance, which was created to help create the community health center called Taboo in Scarborough, and then now advocates for Black community health issues. And then the other branch that separated into was the Black Physicians Association of Ontario, which the mandate was really 2 main areas. One was to advocate for the community, but I guess the main push was to increase the number of Black physicians in the province. So a lot of mentorship, because a lot of us were not getting into medicine, at that time and even now because of all of the different barriers. What has happened over time, so that was the work of, founders like Dr. Miriam Rossi, Dr. Dominic Sheldon, our first president, Dr. Cindy Maxwell, and then Dr. Placide. So Placide Rubabaza. So I was the 3rd president. But over time, it went from being an organization or a group of doctors meeting into an organization that was a not-for-profit and having, annual conferences and then doing a lot of outreach. And at the time of the pandemic, that's where we started to have a more public-facing role. That was at the time that I was president, because it was clear that there was supports needed in our community to address the inequities and the disproportionate infections in our community with regards to COVID-19, the fact that Black communities were the least likely to want the vaccine, and for us to play a role really as interpreters and ambassadors, and not people who are there to convince people to get the vaccine, honestly. It was to say, okay, this is how we're going to do it in community, so you know what the real deal is, and you make your own decision. And no matter what, we're here for you, we love you, we celebrate you, right? If you decide to get it or not. So that is where things kind of took a broader community-facing turn for us. But otherwise, we had been doing a lot of work mentoring and working with the University of Toronto and many other schools to increase the number of Black medical students, which we have. Shout out to Ike Okafor, who has led that work at U of T and across the country. And so that's basically been our evolution. And in that, Chenai came in at the beginning of the pandemic pretty early and took the reins and has helped us really move things forward. Our first ever executive director.
Well done. Well done. Let me ask from both of yours lenses, what is the state of Black health post-pandemic? From a Black person's perspective and services perspective.
Okay, I'm on sabbatical. It's Chenai who's in the eye of the storm.
Okay, all right. Pass it on to her.
I jump in when I feel like, but largely it's Chenai who's at the meetings.
What I will say is, because of the pandemic, a lot of screening wasn't happening at the rate that it used to, and we know screening in Black community was already low, right, in certain areas. So I would say we can't say it's better, and we can't say we want it to be the way it was before the pandemic. But I will say there is a lot of work, whether it's through mobile clinics like the ones that Onye is supporting. Dr. Nnorom is supporting, as well as. What do I say? We've seen a lot of research come out, especially around cancer, right? Dr. Majola Omole has done amazing work around some of the breast cancer screening, and we've done a lot of Black health talks and things around that. What that shows me is we've had one of two problems. Either there's an access issue, and we've been addressing that by doing things like advocating for, the age to be decreased and things like that. But it's also looking at the need for, the racial concordance side of the work that we do, because there are a lot of patients who want to only be served by people like Dr. Nnorom, but there are so few Onyes. We need more. So I think there's always going to be more need than resources. So I would never say that the supply is where it needs to be. And also, if I look at the work that we're doing, the community health centers are doing, a lot of work, but it's obviously it takes a toll on them to be able to try and carry that burden. We are feeling that physician shortage, that even, I guess, impacts of things like, the recession itself, right? I think stress is on the up, which is leading to poor health outcomes for a lot of people. We had Dr. Nazik Ahmad. She talked a lot about how there's an increase of allostatic load in women. I don't know if I'm even saying it right. Allostatic?
That's right.
Yeah. So I think we are just a community that still is trying to grapple with a lot of burdens. We are very resilient as a Black community, but I think the health system still has a lot of work to do. We're trying to start some of those things up with the Black Health Plan that, Black Health Alliance has really been great at champion, and Dr. Nnorom was instrumental in getting those kinds of things going. But we have a long way to go. So if there's any event you're called to, any kind of awareness raising things that are happening, just show up. I think you have to go, because there is a lot of work to do. We also fund smaller research projects. And one of the ones I'm really proud of that's been doing well lately is called Choices. It's a hypertension research project, also looking at how things like nutrition could be used to improve hypertension outcomes, right, in Black community. But it's a drop in the ocean. So much more needs to be done. But Onye, I don't know what you'd like to add to that.
No, I think, when it comes to the projects and initiatives that are going on, it's a beautiful thing. It's hard to know because we don't have the data to say what is the state of Black health before and after. And that's something that we've been advocating for, right? We need better race-based data that's done in a way that serves us, because race-based data has been collected on different groups in ways that actually cause harm, but we need it to be done with us in a way that serves us. But what I will say is, having done this work on racism and Black health, for the last 10 years, is prior to the pandemic, these issues were there and it was largely ignored by people who are in power in healthcare or in the province, that type of thing. The situation in the pandemic of Black folks being disproportionately impacted, issues of distrust, and I don't say mistrust, I say distrust, which is where there have been issues where so many times where we have been mistreated by healthcare and our society in general, that the lack of trust is actually, arguably well-founded, but there were, we played a role in at least creating some trust and some bridges. But aside from that, prior to the pandemic, you didn't see that kind of understanding or resources being mobilized. I would say another major thing was the murder of George Floyd and the international cry around anti-Black racism and activists here in Canada saying, like, no more, right? I would say that was actually the biggest shift in recognition that anti-Black racism was an issue in all of our institutions, healthcare just being one of them. So that since that time, a lot of activists, advocates, really advocated for change and resources in the community for our Black mental health, for cancer screening, for more clinics to be opened up and mobile clinics, and for us to have a Black health plan with funding behind it. So I think what we'll be seeing in the community is, at least for the next few years to come, we'll be seeing more resources that are for us, by us. I don't know if that's going to always be the case. I hope so, but at least the resources are shifting in a way that can help folks. Are people's health worse than it was? It might be, because the pandemic took a toll on everyone, but there have been resources mobilized because of advocacy in our community.
Okay.
And representation matters, by the way. I think part of the power of the advocacy is there are more of us showing up in some of those places where the decisions are made. And so we still need more of that as well.
Absolutely. I will parking lot that. I want to get into some solutions, but we're going to parking lot that for the end of the conversation. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back from the break, we're going to roll up the sleeves, since we're in medical, and get into the Black Health Talk, a fireside chat for women refugees that happened a little while back, but it's still a relevant conversation. It's an ongoing conversation. And Chenai and I, when we were at our last event, she goes, we got to get on and talk about this. So that's why we're here today. So you are watching Black Canada Talking Live. Hold tight. We're going to take a 90-second break, and then we're going to take it to another level with these two beautiful Black women.
You know, and that's what I feel like. You feel like you're the Harriet Tubman of the mind.
I am.
I feel like I'm one of the Harriet Tubmans of intelligent Black people. Like, I want to liberate y'all from like being left behind and ignored and oblivion. Now, really, the rappers get all the attention. You know, seriously, does anybody else feel this way? Like ignorant Black people, they'll be all up, you know, getting all the headlines on the Shade Room.
Overly sexualized Black folks.
Like the twerkers and the, you know, just people that, you know, don't always represent the best of us, you know, the diversity, you know, like people like Dr. Vibe. Like, everybody should know about people like Dr. Vibe. Dr.
Really
Vibe he's trying to do good work for Black people. Dr. Vibe from Toronto. Good to see you, my brother. Dr. Vibe. Everybody follow Dr. Vibe. He has a great show. He's very good at what he does, and I have a lot of respect for him.
Okay, so let me hop into this. What's up, Dr. Vibe? How you doing? Everybody, if you see Dr. Vibe in the chat, everybody go follow the Dr. Vibe show. Dr. Vibe is a real smart brother and a good human being. I like the guy a lot, and he's very intelligent. And I think everyone should pay attention to what he's got going on. We got to shine the spotlight on the intelligent Black people out here that are really doing the good work. Don't just pay attention to the rappers and the celebrities. You know, a lot of these people are losers. Your true winners are your people in your community that are really having your back. You know, helping us to have stronger families and a stronger community. So Dr. Vibe is in that category. So you might see the Dr. Vibe show in this chat. If you see him, please go follow him. Okay. All right. So anyway.
All right. Shout out to Dr. Boyce and Dr. Alicia Watkins. We are big supporters of them, and they're big supporters of Dr. Vibe, to the point now that I have a conversation I do live on Saturday evenings at right now 9 p.m., but it's going to be switching to 7 p.m. And they are now broadcasting it on their platform, and that one of their platforms, which has over 540,000 subscribers.
Wow.
So I am very blessed to have their support in regards to that. But let's get back to the real deal today. We're here with Dr. O and Chenai. They are the stars of the show at the moment. Now, let's talk about this event, the Black Health Talk, a fireside chat for women refugees. How did this come about? I just saw that. You weren't expecting that, were you?
No, because I thought she was going to explain. Okay, so I'm like executive director. Okay, so I will explain. So there's two, I guess, layers to this. So there's Black Health Talks as a series. And then there's the specific one that we had for women refugees. Black Health Talks came about because as we were doing our work in community and the pandemic was wrapping up, there was a lot of requests for Black physicians to stay in touch, right? And there are only a few of us. We can't be in all of the clinics and all of the sites, and people want information on health. So Black Health Talks came out of that in a way to meet community need for us to be, available to give talks, and for the physicians to actually be remunerated for their time, to be honest, so that we can meet all of the, all of the requests. We go out and BPAO supports us. So BPAO becomes almost like that central place that folks can go, and then we can go out and speak in community. Community doesn't have to worry about, paying a doctor to come in or anything like that to give a talk. So the specific one on refugee women is a kind of combination of things that ended up happening, because Black Health Talks, like I said, there's all different talks that are part of the Black Health Talks series. For me, I am the host of a podcast called Race, Health, and Happiness. So the podcast Race, Health, and Happiness, which you can find on any kind of podcast platform, started during the pandemic, and we wanted to really talk about how to thrive in a racialized world. One of our partners, one of our sponsors was Black Creek Community Health Center, which is located in the Jane and Finch area, North York, Toronto, which is an urban community and a large Black community. We said, okay, they were our sponsor for 2023. We said, we're going to do a live event at some point. Fast forward through time, the timing that just aligned for us to do the live event, which was a Black Joy event in September, the African refugees that we now know of who are in Toronto that didn't get the supports that they needed initially, and the health supports, housing supports, the churches stepped up, but Black Creek Community Health Center, led by Cheryl Prescott, shout out to Cheryl, led so much of the healthcare planning for this community. So when we went to go do the Black Joy event, which was planned months before the refugees came, I saw the refugees that were there. And yes, of course, Black Joy is important all the time. And we had a mental health specialist. So that's Natasha Pennycook. You see her photo there. And she was at that event as well. But we said we need to come back and speak specifically to refugee health issues, because the Black Joy event was very broad about staying well in Canada. So we spoke to Cheryl, we spoke to Chenai, we spoke to Dr. Modupe Tunde Bias. She's the obstetrician gynecologist who's there. And we said, let's go back and do something specifically for these refugee and the refugee women, because those were who had come to the Black Joy event and asked to learn more. They said the Black Joy event was really helpful. So Chenai helped to coordinate this, and we got in touch with Dominion Church, Black Creek, and so we were able to put this together. So it was November 6th. It was, it happened on November 6th, but that's how it basically came about. It was a bit serendipitous, right? We were in the space for a different event, saw the need, and said, okay, let's come back. So we came back a few weeks later to really give them a talk that was specific to their needs.
Excellent. From the initial idea to it becoming a reality, how much time elapsed?
I think it was literally weeks. Because I think initially we had, so our vice president was also going to be one of the other panelists, but she was going to give birth.
Wow.
I think almost 2 weeks. She ended up giving birth the 2 weeks in. So it was just great that we had also had Dr. Bias decide to also literally scrub in for us on this event. But I think what had happened is we knew we needed to have it pretty soon, not just because of, people's schedules being busy, but we know the need was there. We had been doing sort of research in the background of how do we make a meaningful contribution with all these different things happening? And a lot of the refugees were obviously scattered, right, at that time. I think there were about 6 churches that had people now. Now I think it's only maybe about 3 or 4 churches. It's there's so many moving parts. So we said we need a centralized location. And it was great that Black Creek had already been doing amazing clinical support for refugees, even specifically on that day. So I think it was just, very serendipitous, like she said, but it worked out perfectly because of that.
Yes. And Cheryl provided the space, and it was just, It just came together very beautifully. Again, alignment. We talk about alignment because it was just a few weeks and we were able to do that.
And a lot of word of mouth, because again, like we say, there's no centralized system right now with everything going on with the refugee response kind of work. So we're just really glad that we ended up actually being able to have people come.
I am very blessed to have a global audience, and there may be people around the world who are watching this live and replay have no idea about this situation. I don't use the word assumption. So could both of you just give us some background context of this whole situation? Because you are both on the front line. If most of us, if we're available to see it, we'll catch snippets on any sort of media platform. So can you give us some context about this situation, the who, what, where, and why?
So since around July, there has been a higher influx of, I won't say higher, I will say the current influx ended up being a bit more pressurized because of housing issues that were already there, right, in Toronto housing. So we know there have been a lot of things like wars and things like that happening that has led to more need. And as African refugees sort of started coming, there was just no space in the inn, as they say, so people are being turned away at shelters. I think the current figure they have is shelters are turning away about 300 people a day in Toronto. And so obviously the African refugees then also had to feel that strain. But I think what was interesting in this particular issue is how it was almost, there was silence on it. It's almost like until Black communities had an outcry and kind of complained, that's when it sort of made it to the news. And I think people felt it more strongly because, it's not the first time we've had sort of refugees coming in, but it just seemed like nothing was available
to the Africans.
And so it was just like, so even when the churches had to come and the churches looked and they're like, our brothers and sisters are sleeping on the street. That's just unacceptable. And they opened themselves up. But I think what's really been hard with what's happened at the churches is they stepped in, and what they thought was going to be temporarily stepping in, they ended up not being able to make use of their spaces for, months. Because right now I know there's some of the churches that still have refugees now. And now imagine this started early in July. So that is a lot. And I know there've been, there were announcements about a lot of money and everything to solve this problem. But it really has been just like a mishmash of a lot of people sort of volunteering to try and solve the problem. And that's what I think has been just very disheartening about the challenge. I know now they have buses that are picking people up at the churches, and the main sort of hubs they're dropping people off in are Windsor and Niagara. But even that kind of procedure, I think there's just a bit more work that needs to be done in making sure that there is more of a welcoming kind of energy for the African community coming. And I know even with just the paperwork, I must say IRCC did end up sort of like going to the churches and like getting people their brown papers eventually. But those early days, people didn't have status to be able to access many services either. So it was just one of those things. It's like, you'd like to help, but what are the ways people can help? So a lot of people stepped in. I know there's a group now called BHAT, Black Housing Association of Toronto, I think is the acronym. Apologies if I've said it wrong, but that has several agencies working in a mixture of like settlement, healthcare, different things. And they, I think, have been trying to work at trying to solve this housing problem, because for the refugees going to Niagara and Windsor, it's still temporary housing. So you move from having community, friends, close-knit, you're in a church, right, to you're now in Niagara, you have to now rebuild community, you have to now figure out resources and try to find employment. And we're all in the middle of a recession. So it's a lot of pieces. I don't envy everyone who's having to work in this, but I do think the solution timeline has just hasn't been the greatest. If we imagine started in July and now it's getting very cold. I know, like, we were talking about the coldest day of the year and things like that. There's just so much more need. So we need to accelerate that housing solution.
Yes, I think so. Chenai is our executive director, so she must speak diplomatically. I'm past president. I don't have to be diplomatic. So let's go.
Okay, go in, doctor, go in.
I don't have to be. I'm not on anybody's.
You go in.
So look, we have had refugees before, and I'm not going to start naming like countries where we had refugees, but where the refugees didn't look like us, housing was provided on time. People were given opportunities on time, jobs on time, and things flowed. When it came to the African refugees, what we ended up seeing is African refugees being, as you know, Chenai described, denied housing, being told there is no space for you, and a larger number of them on the streets in Canada with no housing, no plan for them. And so in a context where Canada just came out of, leaders saying Black Lives Matter, I think numerous people were able to contrast how these Black, African refugees were treated compared to some of the recent, asylum seekers or newcomers to Canada, and really felt like racism was a component of it. I don't know anybody's intention. I cannot say it was racism, but all I know is when the Black people came, the resources weren't there. Okay, so that was what happened. Was it racism or not? I don't want a letter in the mail tomorrow about anything. The point is that is what happened. Okay. And then, yes, churches stepped up, but the majority of these churches were Black-led churches. So Black people came in to help Black people. Not to say there weren't allies. There were many allies, right? But there was that piece. And then, yes, people having their documentation. Those things seemed to flow more for other groups than for us. And so Chenai was actually, so I have to give her flowers because I'm on sabbatical. I'm with my kids. I'm trying to rest. So people were all up in my DMs. I'm like, I need to rest. Chenai,
easy now. Keep your blood pressure down, doctor. Right? Easy now.
Right?
Easy. You're on sabbatical.
Trying, right?
Relax.
So I had to tell folks I cannot be jumping into it or being on the media. I'm gonna have to stay sidelined. So Chenai was actually and so many other organizations and physician groups. Again, shout out to Dr. Meb Rashid, who leads Refugee Health. Shout out to Black Creek for doing the work that they've done. Shout out to Angela Robertson. So there were so many that, I wasn't on the front line at all. It was them who were on the front line. I had to, focus on my children, but we were seeing what was playing out. And so Black folks, Black leaders really came in. And so there has been movement and agencies have been improving things, but we know that there was a Nigerian asylum seeker who died last month from sleeping outside in the cold, right? So that happened in the Peel region. So a lot still needs to be done to create housing. I know one of the refugee women was telling me there was a fire in the middle of the night in her shelter because they've got people packed on, you know what I mean? It's a fire hazard the way they have people packed in some of these shelters. So there is a lot that needs to be done. BPAO and a number of different organizations are trying their best. But I have to say, the treatment of African refugees stood out as far as a disparity compared to how other refugees were treated.
It's true. And I think also...
No, go ahead.
Just to say, I think also there was a lot of almost like we don't have to do anything after money was announced. But, I think what we've really seen is people, you can always announce money, but it doesn't mean anything if the experiences of people is actually changing. Because from what I've seen, even most of the funds that were filtered, it was for existing work that was done. And, that ended up going to the same places that might not have felt the burden the most. And I remember there were, sort of some 50K checks that were given to some of the churches as thanks. But I'm I don't think people understand that if you're not having your income generating activities while you're supporting people, I think that 50,000 was really just a drop in the ocean for, the amount of work that had been done there, So I think even with that, just really recognizing people's efforts and also being embarrassed that people are having to step in for something this should have been something that, exactly as you're saying, there's a plan. If we were able to roll out plans for COVID, even if it wasn't perfect, it was people had to get together. It's a crisis. We need to do this. So it's not like there was a lack of an ability to do that. So for me, it was just very Yeah, like I say, I think this has gone on too long. I would say something that started in July. Again, talking about that. Yeah.
And for international listeners, I think the piece around where we're talking about Windsor and Niagara, again, I can talk race and I can just be blunt. There's not a lot of Black people there. Yes, there's Black people. Somebody from Niagara is going to message me or DM me tonight that like there's Black people in Niagara. Okay, I'm sure there is, but not compared to like Toronto, where we're 10% of the population, right? So when you're coming from an African country and then you're here, and then you know there's resources that are culturally appropriate, and there's providers, and there's all the resources here, and then you're taken by bus, because even some of the women who had RSVP'd that were going to come to our session, it looks like the night before they were bussed out in the middle of the night without a lot of advance warning to these other communities that are really not very diverse communities. And so, of course, it's good for people to have housing. It's good for people to be actually bused, but there needs to be a plan in place so that there is an understanding of the anti-Black racism that they would face. There is a plan about the appropriate healthcare that they need to have that's at least culturally safe, right? So it's these things that I'm hoping, if they weren't in place before, are going to be in place going forward. But it's these issues that made us say, okay, for the women, we knew quite a few of the women were, either pregnant upon arrival or became pregnant while they were here, actually. And we wanted to make sure that they had the health information that they needed. So many folks in a precarious place, women feeling unsafe. I know some of the women were telling me in the middle of the night in the shelters, you hear people screaming from their trauma, people crying, right? And just feeling very unsafe. So letting people know what resources are available, letting people know about mental health, and letting people know about like just general women's health issues that might not have been discussed back home or might not have been available, letting them know what was available to them here in Canada, we felt was key to be able to provide this now for them.
Okay, good stuff. Let's catch up. We've got some conversation topics here. Let me just catch up. Chenai's going, Dr. O's on fire. Yes, she's on fire. There you go, Dr. Tati saying this is such an important topic. Thanks for sharing. Sarah Yango, great journalist from the Ottawa region, saying, hello, Ukraine. And says,
I wasn't going to name places. But your words, not mine.
Don't worry. Sarah says, preferential treatment is paid by our tax dollars. Sarah also says it's racism. I think she means to say period, not period. But maybe she's saying period.
No, she's saying period.
Yes, period. Yes. And then yes. Sarah's also saying all our blood pressure should be up about this. Outrageous. Black refugees matter.
Like selective empathy, man. Selective compassion. Like
Dr. Tati says, my God. Sarah has a question. You may or may not know. What's happening with the Francophone Black refugees who were shuffled out of Quebec to Ontario?
Well, I mean, I would say I can't speak to any of the official groups working around that, but I know when we did, Taibu and us had done some sort of like community work around what the issues in care are for linguistic groups, I'd say, like for Francophone. And there's also a community in Hearst in Northern Ontario that I can't even start with the horror stories there. But when you're waiting to speak to a specialist, as an example, you already wait a long time if you're English speaking. So if you're not, you wait even longer. And so those issues, even right to the onboarding, I mean, Onye can even speak to this. The day of the event, we had one lady who only understood French, and it's like, we were lucky. Oh, there's another sort of like staff member in the clinic who is bilingual. So I think there's not enough there. There's a point where I was at revival time, and there was a sign that said something like clinic is here today and things like that. And it was only in English. And I realized something that small has such an impact, because someone who needs to see the doctor that day and does not understand English, like that's it. You get to miss your clinic day. And so I think there's whatever is there is still not where it needs to be. I know like community health centers like Taibu have a lot of sort of like bilingual service providers, but
Taibu has a mandate that's French now.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I think it's not common. So anywhere else you're going, I mean, even if you're trying to get onto the bus to go somewhere, I just don't think we're at a place where that support could be where it needs to be.
The conversation topic is the well-being of refugee women. What is, as we are broadcasting on December 3rd from both your lenses, what is the state of the well-being of these refugee women?
Ooh. So, I mean, there's layers to this because there's also, I mean, the refugee men, like I said, one just passed away, right? Like sleeping outside in the cold, a Nigerian man. So I think Black for Black refugee health, it's dire. Like, yes, when you come to Canada and you've got your refugee status, so that's the brown paper and everything that Chenai was talking about. When they first came, a lot of them could not access the refugee health resources. So right there, that was a barrier. We focused on women because of the issue of pregnancy and the vulnerability around that. And then there were plans, I think, to have one for the men. I don't know if that one, when that one is taking place, but both, all these issues are important. But for women, I think it really was really understanding, particularly when it came to maternal health, understanding what was available to them. So we wanted to let them know. We wanted to let them know about mental health, right? And again, we even had some young men in the audience for the women's session. And mental health came up there. So I think, again, for because I don't want to say this as it only affects one gender, right? So for the men, I think mental health is so huge. For any refugee, mental health is an issue, right? For all of us here in Canada, mental health is in crisis. So then you're coming from a country where you've been mistreated or there's been so much trauma, and then you come here and then you have that sense of abandonment. And then you read in the paper that it might be due to your race on top of all of those things, right? So as soon as you reach, there's racism and there's this mistreatment. And there's, I think for some people, that issue around hope, right? You travel this whole way with a sense of hope, only to arrive and the dreams look like the door is still shut. So that's going to take a toll on somebody's mental health as well. And then specifically for the women, like I said, because of maternal health, and we know around Black women's maternal health, right? Whether you're a refugee or not, there are barriers there, right? As far as us, again, I'm a mother, I was pregnant, being believed, being, our pain being taken seriously, mortality as a Black woman, let alone you add that extra layer of being a refugee and not having as much of a voice. And not having your family there, right? You don't have your family there. They're, suffering back home likely and depending on you to provide support for them. And you are experiencing trauma here as a Black woman or as a woman who is pregnant. So all of those things, I think, were why we did it for the women, and making them know that, especially as asylum seekers, like there are mental health resources available, and there are mental health resources that are, so we created a resource document for them to know where the Black health centers are, centers like Taibu Community Health Center, Black Creek Community Health Center, but also Women's Health in Women's Hands that focuses on Black and racialized women. So I think, because now folks are all over in different cities. So I don't know the state of like all of the groups, but simply to say when we held that, we asked the women the questions that they wanted to know about. So that's how we had a sense. We didn't just come in and, decide what we were going to talk to them about. We asked those who had registered as Black refugee women, African refugee women, what were the priorities? And it was mental health, understanding racism, and then also interpersonal violence. So in relationships, right? Yep. The violence that can happen in relationships. So we talked, especially Natasha Pennycook, who's an amazing Black psychologist, talked about, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual and financial abuse, all the different types of abuse, so that women were aware of it. And we, again, created a handout so that they could find resources if they needed it. So those were the main areas that the women themselves asked us to speak about.
And then in terms of in the clinics, there were a lot of the chronic conditions we see in Black community in general. Those were also still evident for a lot of those clinics. So it was people who had diabetes, hypertension, and I'd say, I guess, similar, like a high blood pressure. There was a lot of that. And I just think that a lot of that is always still linked to racism anyway, right? So if we're talking social determinants of Black, yes. Yeah. So again, if someone is coming from Africa and has no concept yet of being an other in that way, understanding how all of that impacts, it'll be huge. I mean, and if you're not used to sleeping in a place with 900 people, or however, I mean, it was like, I remember one of the rooms in revival time had something like 60, almost like 60 beds. And so, yeah, it's a lot. And I wish people just remember that anyone and everyone can be a refugee. There's nothing special about needing help. Like, I don't know why it's like it ends up being such a stigmatized kind of status, because to me, I'm like, if a tornado happens today and I have to go somewhere, I am a refugee in that time. Like, so there's this.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Also shouting out here, Fitness IQ Cam, otherwise known as KSF EYL RWFQ, says evening. I'd like to see if you both remember a moment. Do you, each of you, remember the first time you encountered a Black African woman refugee? Do you remember it all?
In my life?
Well, more in the last few months. Or any sort of experiences that you'd like to share personally from your lens, encountering, engaging these women. Any memory or anything you'd like to share with our audience, or special things that say, you know what, I can't forget that, because I have many encountering them that, like, it gets me emotional just sharing about it, because the stories have just impacted me for my life. Have you had any of those moments, either one of you, that you'd be comfortable in sharing?
Well, I just know that there's one refugee that I support, and how I met her was actually that I have my colleague Fikayo, who runs Project Impacting Lives. He's always sort of supporting the homeless in Toronto. I just reached out to him and I said, this African refugee thing is just it's got me angry. Do you know anyone who's in need that I can help? And then he actually said that, I've got a contact from a hospital where there's a lady who's basically her feet are swollen from walking all day from shelter to shelter, just being turned away. And she needs a place to stay. And that was that. So just even thinking about that, to say, like, your legs are swelling from Lord knows how many kilometers of just being turned away. And especially because that same day I remember reading someone saying, I have friends in the shelter system, and the shelters that are saying they don't have space, like, they're able to go. So it's like they don't have space for Black people. So, it was just, I just remember hearing that, and then also hearing this lady's story. And just to say, to me, it was, it was hard to think of knowing that people are being treated that way, knowing that you've already arrived after a very long journey, escaping a very harrowing situation, just to witness almost like an unnecessary hostility from people. So I just remembered that, because I realize now that empathy is not a standard. It's not something everyone has. And so just hearing a story and trying to think, like, what that would do to you, and imagining what that does to that person, I think that was, I won't forget that for sure.
Yeah. I think for me, because largely the outreach that we did was the event, and I've been, like I said, I'm on sabbatical and I'm trying to rest. But I remember when I was in training. So where you say the first time working with a Black refugee, I was a trainee, and so I already had my MD, but you have to work under the supervision of another doctor. And I had this woman, and she was lovely, and her 3 kids. And I'm not going to get into details because you don't want to breach doctor-patient confidentiality. But that was the first time, because I already had my MD, where I was able to, make calls for her to get the housing that she needed. And, when her son was, facing challenges, get on the phone with the doctor and say, this is Dr. Nnorom. What is happening? He needs this, he needs that. Again, without getting into the details, there was trauma that one of the children experienced, and being able to organize the mental health services, and then later to realize, which was learning for me, that although the child had faced the trauma, it was the mother who was carrying the guilt. And so the child was actually okay despite the trauma, but the mom, felt a great deal of guilt about it. And so we had to help her through that. And so I got to understand the role for me as a Black physician, what the MD, the doctor, when I would call and say to the landlord, this needs to be cleaned up, it would be done, right? And realizing the blessing and the responsibility and what that was for somebody like her in our community. And I think I remember, I'm getting like, when I had to say bye, when I finished my training, right? And say like, I have to move on, which I did because I was going on to do my master's, but she was just crying and thanking me. I'm getting like,
it's okay.
But it's those moments, right?
Yeah.
Where we know that we can make a difference. And so that was the beginning of my journey of understanding what this role means and how I can leverage that to support folks in our community. But yeah. She was lovely and her family was lovely and they did well.
What has upset each one of you the most about this situation? If there's one thing or a few things, go ahead.
For me, it's just that it's an unnecessary situation. I think there's so much more happening in this world that we can call complex. There is honestly nothing complex about just being humane with people, because again, like I say, there are avenues where you say, here is a vehicle of kindness, and people are just not willing to even show that. That's what I think just hurts. Where it's like we kind of go full circle. I remember when we first had that, I think when we were part of the first article, I think it was like a CBC article or something in July, when we were still talking about that and saying, why do you have to wait for us to shame you into action? There's just some things where it's like, there are people sleeping on the street and that should incense you enough and upset you enough to make a plan. Don't wait for people to be like, look at what everyone's having to do.
Dr. O?
No, I think it would be the same for me. It's just like, why did this happen compared to other refugees? And there should have been a plan in place. And even until now, like I said, we saw a recent death, like there just aren't enough, resources mobilized. And so I found that upsetting. I think it's a beautiful thing how Black community has stepped up and allies have stepped up. For BPAO, again, like we have resources available for refugees to understand how to navigate the healthcare system. So it was 2 different documents around just understanding the healthcare system, and then one specific to Black women's health. So, I do see a silver lining in the fact that we've been able to kind of at least provide some sort of product of navigation, helping people navigate through the system. But overall, it's maddening, as Chenai said, what has happened, and it could have been prevented.
Okay. So as we're winding down our conversation today, have a 2-part question and maybe a third conversation, 2-part conversation piece and maybe a third, but a call to action. So for those who don't look like us, what is your call to action when it comes to this situation?
Meaningfully contribute. The time when the news came out about the church, a lot of people went there and wanted to just kind of take pictures to show that they were
I heard situations of that where people were donating and they were making sure they took a picture of them donating.
No, so things like that, like just, you would never want to be treated that way. Like, I think like meaningfully contribute. If the same way you're gonna rally and do these large fundraisers, for whatever issue you care about every day. I mean, let's dispute that point that you care more about your dogs than you do about, communities of color. So I would just like to see a lot more. If there are more people who are allies speaking out about these things than us, then I feel like we're in a better place. I think it's a given that we do this. This is our Ubuntu, we'll always show, but I think we need people who don't look like us to be as, upset and active.
Yeah.
Dr. O?
Yeah, no, I think that's it. It's be vocal, continue, because I think in the media, our Black refugees have largely been forgotten. So we need to keep the conversation going on social media, general media, and then also, donate. So speak out so that our politicians and everybody knows this is still an issue that needs to be on their agenda, and resources need to be mobilized. And then, yes, continue to donate and contribute. Ideally, not taking a selfie at the same time, but yes, let's donate and contribute to be able to mobilize resources for these folks.
what is the call to action for the people who look like us when it comes to this situation? Because this became on my radar when there was a gentleman who's the president of Paramount Fine Foods, did a press conference downtown Toronto talking about this refugee situation. I go, wow, here's someone who doesn't look like me talking about it. And I'm going, did we miss the boat on this situation a little bit and we had to play catch up?
No, I think the media doesn't show up for us. If we say we're doing a press conference, the same people don't show up the same way as somebody who doesn't look like us holds a press. Because I mean, the churches, it's the Black-led churches that showed up. It's a Black community, but we don't have the same, microphone amplification.
So what is then the call to action for those who aren't in the church environment who look like us when it comes to this situation?
I would say, well, first, I also need to do a shout out to Ingrid Wilson for running the Canadian Association of Black Insurance Professionals. They did so many donation drives. Even now, she's doing another one for coats and things like that. And she's one of those people who'll approach me and say, what can we do? What can we do? And I think Craig Wellington's been the same. They've been very supportive. We got them to do some porta potties and things at the churches. That's the kind of thing. So if you are in spaces where you can do more, then do more. Don't just kind of do the organizational sanctioned help and things like that. So I think it was actually, Orlando who taught me a phrase yesterday. He said, he was talking about meat. It's money. What is it? Oh gosh, Orlando, if you're still watching, it's money, something like effort, attention, and time. And so if you are giving that full suite to the situation, then you're doing enough. But I think that we have an apathy problem right now across the board, and that's more worrisome. So if you want to sort of like still reignite the human part of yourself, show up, volunteer at the food bank. If you don't have the money, you can do all the other things. You can do the EAT, but just being there, like look for, if you do not have 1, 2, 3 refugee friends that you're talking to and checking in with, like find them. Get them now and see, like, how can I support you? If they need things like work experience or whatever, create opportunities. Like, I think there are a lot of really meaningful ways to help just an individual, because we know in our groups, if you help one, you help like 9. So
yeah. Dr. O?
No, I think Chenai said it all. That is exactly it. If you can help amplify. If you can, do it through your pocket, or your organization or institution can do that, great. But if you can donate your time, that's fantastic too. Like whatever you can do, I think it's a matter of like, don't forget, our community. Don't forget these African refugees. Keep them top of mind, especially as the holidays are coming. It's going to be so hard for people. Let's unite. Let's support.
Even seen snow yet. Wait till that comes down.
Oh gosh. Seasonal affective disorder is definitely already around. I would say that.
Yeah, the darkness. Daylight is not as long. They're feeling it. There's so much things, right? And missing their families. So I feel like this is a time of giving, right? We just had Giving Tuesday. This is the time where I'm hoping people can reach deep into whatever they have to give. Time, money. Yeah.
Their time, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Even if it's time, your time, or come with your families, or whatever you can do. Whatever you can do. I think is much needed and will be so much appreciated. When I work with the women, like anything is just like, wow, you know what I mean? It is appreciated. It's a beautiful thing.
Last conversation piece. We're coming to the end of 2023. Where would you like to see this situation in a year's time?
Can we not see this situation?
I think that's the answer.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that was short and sweet to the point.
Yeah, let's see it resolved, and let's see it not happen to anybody else. Let this never happen again to anyone.
All right, fantastic. Well, ladies, I want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your positive, productive schedules to share through me with the Black Canada Talking family. Continue all the hard work that you're doing. It's not hard work, it's hard work. And I'm definitely going to be reaching out to see if there's anything I can do to help. Sarah Yango goes, mic drop to both of you. If that's coming from Sarah, you're doing some real good stuff. As always, I want to say to you, to your families, to the organization, and to all the many people that you serve. Remember to give yourselves grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and we'll please keep in touch.
Well, dude,
thank you for your time, which is the most precious thing that you have. And Dr. O, see how long you can take a break for. Bye. Have a great day. Take care. All right. Okay, family. There's the organization, Black Physicians Association of Ontario. There's their contact information, website, X, formerly known as Twitter, LinkedIn and Facebook, Black Physicians Association of Ontario, and Instagram at the BPAO. All right, that is it. And we got a few last comments here. Yes. And Sarah Yango says, thank you for the work that you do. Absolutely fantastic. All right, family, that's it for today. You can watch replays of the Black Canada Talking at the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and also the Dr. Vibe Show, the DRVIBESHOW.com. Also, please subscribe if you're up to the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube. Hit the subscribe and the notification button. Share the information about the Dr. Vibe Show and Black Canada Talking, all these things that we do here, and also follow the Dr. Vibe Show on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And also, if you are interested, you can surely advertise your business, product, or service to the many people that watch this platform. All right. So contact me, dr.vibe at the drvibeshow.com. So as we shut it down, we always say this at the end: live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. Don't just manage your time, manage your energy. And always remember to give yourselves grace. And a big shout out to Anita. And thank you, Anita Wong, for making this happen. God bless. Peace, well, keep the faith, and walk good. Yeah.